Well, for many of the stuck and stranded, certainly no laughing matter. And it's not just about the aggravation, right? It's also going to be about money. You got those change fees, you've got flight fees, you've got hotel and food costs, a lot of which not covered by the airlines. That all adds up fast, meaning you could be on the hook for thousands of dollars in extra travel costs. What exactly are your rights as a traveler? Joining us now, Brandon Macsata. He's Executive Director of the Association for Airline Passenger Rights. Brandon, thank you for joining us. What rights...
Thank you for having me.
No, you're welcome. What rights do passengers have, if any?
Well, it's interesting listening to your segments and the airline industry going after the new tarmac delay rule. Because before Secretary LaHood came in at the Department of Transportation, we virtually had no rights. We were packed in planes like sardines. The airlines stuck their head in the sand when it came to excessive delays, and they didn't care. The only thing they cared about was their profits and not their customers. So now that we have this rule in place, we strongly support it because it's the closest thing we have to our rights being protected when we go to an airport and we get on an airplane.
But some of these cancellations no doubt have at least something to do with that, right? I mean, American or Delta or whatever, rather say, let's cancel the flight rather than spend a couple $100,000 on fines because we can't get out but our passengers are on the plane.
I understand that. And the alternative, however, was 10 or 15 years the airlines trying to self-police themselves and passengers sitting on the runways for 9 hours without access to food, water, sometimes working toilets. So we need to strike a balance when we're trying to figure out what is the best way to, regulate the airline industry. But certainly, having us sit on an airplane for 9 hours is not the answer. If airlines if they're going to play this cat and mouse game and cancel flights, then maybe DOT needs to look at some, further ways that they can, govern this. But the bottom line is the airlines, they don't care about us as passengers. The only thing they care about is when we swipe that credit card online and book our flight. At that point, they can care less. As passengers, as customers, we think that the relationship that we have with an airline should continue after the purchase.
Well, they've done a great job at establishing regional monopolies, right? I mean, if you live in New Jersey like I do, you go to Newark, you got about an 80-some% chance of having to fly United / the new Continental. If you live in Minneapolis, you're flying Northwest, which is now Delta, right? So they've kind of got you. So you could be mad, but unless you're willing to drive a few hundred miles to another airport, not much you're going to be able to do.
Well, and unfortunately, this is the only industry in the country that we deal with this. If you go to Sears to buy a washer and dryer and they say it's going to be delivered in 9 hours, 9 days later, if it's not there, you have recourse. If you go to a hotel and they say, we're going to check you in at 3 o'clock, and the next day at 3 o'clock, you're still not checked in, you have a recourse. When you go into an airport and you try and get on an airplane, you don't have any recourse. If you're working in D.C. and you have to go to Tucson, Arizona for work, what are you going to do? You can't just hop on a train. It gets you there, conveniently and quickly. So our hands are tied. But I think at this point, customers are really just fed up with the airline industry and the lack of regard for our rights.
And to your point about the Sears analogy, when you buy something, right, that is your item. You have guaranteed the purchase of that item or they have to give you your money back. If you read the back of an airline ticket, it is not legally a contract of carriage, right? I mean, the airline is under no financial obligation. I'm sure they want to. But there's no financial obligation that they have to get you to where you're going. It's not a deal. It's not a contract.
Exactly, and I think that's something that DOT is looking at right now. We submitted public comment on this issue. We feel that when you purchase an airline ticket, you need to have an understanding that you're going to be getting from point A to point B. And in this cat and mouse game, whether it's the airlines canceling flights to avoid fines, or whether your flight is canceled, whether you'll be reimbursed, or whether you get a credit or whatever, it's just crazy. I mean, the fact that you mentioned earlier in your segment, the money that the airlines are making off change of flight fees. We live in the most technologically savvy society in the world. You mean to tell me that we're going to still be operating under this outdated system where if I want to change my flight, I've got to pay $150? It's absurd.
Yeah, Brandon, we appreciate your passion. Please start a rail advocacy organization. Okay, I would join it. Brandon Macsata.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.